Welcome to this EDUcast, maintaining customer experience during and post-pandemic. With me today is Ross Williams from Virsae. He's a Chief Success Officer, and I'm Gary Audin. As we usually do, we talk about our agenda. We're talking a lot about the post and the pre-pandemic periods, customer experience, compliance, planning. How do you improve the outcomes? How it influences DevOps, and especially how we work with remote agents. So let's start off with the first question. With the growth of work from home users, how has the pandemic impacted the users and the organizations they work for?
Well, the big one in the first instance for most, Gary, was enabling that work from home capability. So in our experience, most of our customers were set up already, so they theoretically were able to move IP-enabled agents and workers outside of the enterprise, and they got set up relatively quickly. But after that, they were pretty quickly presented with a whole bunch of other factors to deal with. So moving the workforce to home was one thing, and getting it operational, but then getting it working to a level that ensured adequate customer experience, user experience, and business compliance became the real challenge.
What you're talking about here is performance, not just simply connectivity. And the first one I think we ought to talk about is capacity planning.
Right, well, moving those workers from the enterprise to home caused a complete change in the flow of data through the organization. So what customers had in terms of what they measured and how they interpreted and understood those metrics were largely thrown into complete disarray. The media was taking a completely different path, and a lot of that existing reporting merely didn't work. And other areas of the networks were flooded as delays in connecting agents and customers together caused a kind of gridlock. And you can see there in the statistics we pulled from our healthcare and central and local government verticals, there was a massive increase in the number of calls. So those types of organisation were central to the response to the pandemic. And we saw amongst those customers over the period of the pandemic, a massive increase in traffic. In fact, a 32% increase, which was in numeric terms, more than 2 billion calls across our customer base.
I can imagine a lot of the user organizations couldn't believe that kind of increase at all, and were not even prepared for more than, let's say, 5 or 10%. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, Gary. And we saw this in the spikes in traffic, and also in the way our users behaved on our platform, and the types of reports and how they were looking at things, how they were behaving in attempting to manage this new environment.
Yeah, that gets into the next question. All of this has a significant impact on customer experience. What does this graph mean in front of us?
Yeah, well, the big thing that was in most people's face immediately when they made that transition and they moved their workforces home was the customer and the user experience. So there's CX and UX, because there's two sides to an interaction. CX is the customer's side, and UX is the internal person's side. And often you'll find that the experience in both directions is not symmetrical. So one party can hear the other fine, but not so in the other direction. So what we're able to measure with our platform right across the globe was a real reduction in CX and UX. So we've combined them on that graph. And you can see at the peak of the response, 68% of calls had some type of degradation on them because of this move to home. And that was a massive increase. So that graph there is depicting that climb that was taking place early in March. And in fact, the world's worst quality day from a real-time interaction perspective was on March 23rd, where that 68% peak, we hit that.
Am I looking correctly? I'm looking at the 68% to the far right. Down at the bottom, the MOS score of greater than 4 is less than 10%, so it was overwhelmingly bad?
overwhelmingly bad for periods of time. So this doesn't mean that 68% of conversations were unusable, but in fact it means that 68% of conversations had some form of degradation during them, which is a lot more than we normally see.
Now, let's move to the next one because it's an interesting question, port capacity. This is how much I have set aside for my capacity. And are you showing me we overwhelm that?
This is to do with compliance, and regulations in many countries mean that callers have to be aware of the fact that their call's being recorded. Insurance companies and the like need to play disclosure statements, and there's resources that are required to do that. And because the media is flowing around the network in a completely different fashion now, and that increase in traffic, it often causes the resources that are used to fill that role, often cause them to be overwhelmed. And you can see in that particular example, which is a real world example, when the ability to play those announcements to warn that the call's being recorded or to play a disclosure statement, they get to a point where that is not available. So that part of the business process was completely going missing at times, which is it's a major thing when you're in breach of compliance.
Let's talk more about that compliance. What you're telling me is even if they got the calls coming in, they couldn't record them. Is that it?
Well, that's another example. That's another example of compliance. So one thing's playing those mandatory announcements and those disclosure statements. And another part of compliance was if my agents and my workforce are at home now, and I'm required to record those calls, is that actually still working? Because the media flow has changed and it's completely different. So to record a call, there's a forking of the media. So it's effectively like a conference call where the call recorder is told to enter the call as a third party and to record the media. And this is where you find the media. But in many cases, the media streams weren't able to get through access lists of firewalls, because of the new path, and find its way to the recorder, which means in a lot of cases, call recording wasn't able to intercept those calls and record, again, breaching compliance in a lot of countries.
Did this compliance limitation actually cause some problems with like penalties and fines for some organizations?
Oh, absolutely, Gary. And in some countries, it's very, very steep. In this part of the world, in Australasia, there's an ombudsman. And if you fail to record a call, even one call, you have to inform the ombudsman. And failure to do that, failure to even be aware that you're not recording, can result in very heavy penalties.
Now, Virsae has been in the business of monitoring and collecting information. Where does Virsae fit in this whole picture?
Well, our flagship product, VSM or Virsae Service Management, it provides a whole new level of visibility in this unified and contact center space. It's a cloud-based application. It's continually updated under a DevOps support structure, and it leverages machine learning and AI across the massive data sets that our global community of customers generate. And quite frankly, the more the data that you can process, the smarter your AI becomes. And frankly, Gary, when we entered this market, we thought it was about time that someone modernized this space. The legacy providers are locked in with a last century approach, and we're able to go to the cloud, work with big data, apply machine learning and AI, which is really the way forward for this. And it's enabled our customers to get a view and get visibilities of their environments that they've never had before.
You talk about the quantity of data and its effect on AI. What are the metrics that Virsae has used to collect and process the pandemic impact?
Well, this slide's good because it gives you an idea of the scale of the data that we deal with. So this, on the left-hand side, that's a typical month of VSM in action. Almost 42 million events auto-remediated. Over 500 million calls every month assessed for user experience. Almost 1 million channels measured for capacity usage. And on the contact center side, almost 70,000 queues are analysed for customer experience and detailed customer journey metrics provided in those 70,000 queues globally. On the right-hand side, that's an indication of our market verticals where we're strong. You can see healthcare, central and local government. That's a big portion of our customer base, and those customers were central or are central to the pandemic response.
Now, in this graph, am I interpreting correctly that 68% is what we saw earlier, which was that March date, and this is showing significantly improved operations? We all want visibility. What does Virsae deliver with all this information?
Well, again, on the left-hand side, being a cloud application, we're able to look at the metrics. We're able to look at how our customers use our platform, and we use that information to improve what we do as well. So during the pandemic, we've seen some of our reports that customers run. The biggest one was up almost 2,500% across the board. We've seen a 370% increase in the reports that are run. And some of them are, as you can see there on that left, hundreds of percents of increase in the number of reports that are run. Our active users, which isn't shown there too, just absolutely blew out. So the number of people accessing our platform to manage their environments, the behavior they used, and in fact the changes they made, are all recorded by Virsae Service Management. And you can see there, on the right-hand side, following that 68% peak on March 23rd, our users used the intel that we provide them and the actionable recommendations to get voice quality back to pre-COVID levels. So CX and UX improved right back to the way it was, simply because VSM gave our customers the actionable items that they could take to improve that voice quality, and they did, and it's proven out by that graph.
Now, you're talking about how many reports were driven from your system. Were you able to keep up with all of those reports? You have the capacity?
Yeah, well, yes, it's another benefit of being in the cloud, Gary. So we've got virtually unlimited processing power. And the way our cloud application works is it's virtualized across multiple data centers inside Microsoft Azure all around the world. And we're simply able to dial up more servers. So we can bring online literally thousands of servers at very short notice. So our capacity kind of breathes with the loading that it's put under, so that can be expanded. Within minutes, it can respond and expand the amount of processing power that we have.
Now, the next slide brings up DevOps, and a lot of people aren't thinking through this particular situation. How has it changed pre to post-pandemic?
Well, we run as most SaaS businesses do, we run a DevOps support structure back here in the development house. So the developers that create the functionality, they're also responsible to support and respond to that. And that enables a continuous flow of enhancements out into the cloud application. So our enhancements are coded, tested, and released, and there's no break to the service. There's no downtime. Our customers and business partners, they don't have to do anything. So everyone gets to consume the new features and functionality with no steps. So it's not like a traditional upgrade or a patch to our enterprise application that drives internal effort and requires a small project internally. This is entirely in the cloud, and we provide it all, absolutely no break. On the right-hand side, you can see there's a change that we made. So during the pandemic, we're able to make a change and collect an extra data set for our contact center customers, because we could see the demand for additional visibility into the agent environment when they were working from home. We did that during the pandemic. So during what will be, I'm sure, in our lifetimes, the most disruptive event to business continuity that any of us will ever experience, didn't stop us from rolling out new features. And in fact, during that pandemic, we onboarded 56 new customers during that time period. So it didn't slow us down, didn't stop us at all.
Now, customer experience is what we've been focusing on. How does this display benefit the agent with customer experience?
So what we've done here is we've broken down the customer journey into the contact center, because we could see that with the whole new and the change to the media flow through organizations that when the agents are suddenly at home, the whole customer experience and user experience can change. Our customers took the basic steps, like what that you can do to deal with the work at home environment. So they do things like the agent was told to plug their PC in to an Ethernet connection on the router and not rely on Wi-Fi. They were told to use or provided with corded headsets rather than cordless, because all impacts to quality are cumulative. And these things are quite obvious. And a lot of our customers moved from consumer type internet to business grade internet for those work at home agents. And those steps are obvious. A lot of our customers took them, but there's still degradation to the CX and UX, and there's things that you just can't overcome. Like once you've taken those steps, you can't defy the laws of physics. There's always going to be latency. There's always going to be jitter. So if we provide deeper analysis of that, we're able to steer the customers, the callers into the contact centers. We're able to steer them around those bottlenecks by providing that extra visibility. The algorithms to do that exist on these contact center platforms. It's just a matter of knowing how to tweak them.
Would you continue the discussion of call quality?
Okay, so what we've done here, Gary, is bring the same level of visibility to work at home agents as they had within the enterprise. So that makes no difference. So we can still see what's going on for individual agents. But the key thing is for the contact center management to understand when a work at home agent might be providing a less than satisfactory CX or UX to the callers. So if you understand this at a granular level and you understand the contact center journey that customers are undertaking, you can tweak things like the queuing algorithm or the proficiency level for your agents, and you can bypass the call scenarios or the media flow scenarios that contribute to bad CX or bad UX. So these settings are all already there in these platforms, and it's just a matter of tuning, and it's just a matter of understanding how that media flows through the organization and then out to those work at home agents.
So this is showing me graphs over time. Is that what I see here?
Yes. Yeah, and in particular aspects of what's going on from a jitter, latency, packet loss perspective. The key things that impact that CX and UX.
This is very high resolution then.
Yes, it is. So the view you get is a sample of what's going on from a network perspective and a CX UX perspective every 5 seconds. So it's quite granular.
So continuing, we've got the agent, we've got customer experience issues. How do you solve it for individual agents? Do you have that kind of visibility?
Yeah, so that's part of what we brought to the contact center is that visibility of agents. Agents are kind of an overlay to the underlying UC environment, and often we were finding that our customers were saying that they can't link the agent to the UC environment adequately. So we made changes to do that. So we created a new tab on a dashboard that brought all that information together. So the thing is with these environments is this data exists and technical people and engineers can piece it together, but they can't do that on an ongoing basis. They can do it in terms of troubleshooting and sort of looking in the rear vision mirror. What we've brought to it is we've automated all that stuff that the clever engineers do, and we do all that processing, but we do it in real time and then produce it in a dashboard so that contact center management and other people can consume that information to see what's going on.
Yeah, I like the name you gave your virtual engineer, the artificial intelligence engineer, and this is a good pair of URLs to go find out more about that. If you want to contact Virsae, both the US, UK, Europe, and Asia Pacific, here's contact information. And I'd like to thank you, Ross, for another enlightening EDUcast.
As usual, Gary, it's a pleasure. Thanks for your time.